Hey everyone, welcome to day 20 of our 30-day challenge of doing YouTube Live every single day. We do YouTube Live every day about different business ideas, different opportunities, different side hustles, and industries that you should get into to make more money. Today's episode is quite interesting. It's going to be about gardening. You might think like, oh, gardening, it's such an old field. It's done and dusted. What the hell is happening in gardening? Well, gardening is seeing a huge disruption right now, and there are some big players that are coming into the gardening scene in India. So we are going to discuss that. Before getting into it, please like, please subscribe, please comment if you want to see an industry that you want us to cover. Okay, gardening. I'll start by telling you why we're looking at gardening. If you look at the shelf behind me, my wife is a big gardener. We have probably 150 plants in our small Bombay flat, and our entire apartment is just full of plants. And
She's a gardening influencer too. She has a Instagram page on it, right?
yeah, she has an Instagram page with around 7,000 people as well. So she's really into gardening. She loves gardening, and it's something that she picked up from her family. But what I've learned from her are a couple of things. That gardening is changing dramatically in India. So first of all, what is the market? The overall gardening market in around the world is around $50 billion. Pretty big, right? So that means your plants, it means your supplies, it means your pots, it means all the things that go along with gardening. And what actually happened in India during COVID is that the gardening market went down because COVID reduced the demand for gardening. But it went down overall because people were not going to nurseries anymore. That is the traditional way of doing gardening in India. But what happened is that gardening moved online during COVID.
Yeah. So
So
I
yeah,
think I think it declined primarily because of the lockdowns and everything in place. But the
exactly.
demand for it, the desire for it definitely increased because you were spending so much more time at your home and
And you
stuff like
want a
that.
beautiful home, you want a lovely home full of plants. Who doesn't want that?
And
So yeah,
and I mean we'll get to it. Beauty is just one part of what plants can offer. There's
yeah.
so much more. Yeah.
So yeah, I was reading this article about how Snapdeal saw a huge increase in the demand for home gardening supplies during the lockdown, and this demand was driven not from metros; it was driven from tier two cities like Indore. So it's not just the metro elites who are driving this demand for gardening; it's all over the country. And now we're let's dive into why gardening is growing in India. First of all, now this is my opinion.
Yeah.
I've seen the kind of pollution there is in Delhi, and I've seen the kind of pollution that there is in North India in general, and even in Bombay, even in southern Indian
Even
cities.
all metro cities in India are basically polluted, right?
Yeah,
Delhi is obviously far more than others, but even the others are not healthy to live in.
yeah. So people want to have a bunch of plants in their homes to make them at least feel like they're breathing in better air. It might be true, it might not be true, but at least I get the feeling that I'm surrounded by plants and I'm breathing better air.
I mean, scientifically, it's true, right? Like if you have enough number of plants, they sort of take
Yeah,
on the carbon dioxide, and
yeah.
yeah.
Number two, my opinion, again, Indians like greenery more than people in the West. If you go to a Western city, you'll see that there are far fewer plants than in Indian cities. And you'll see that in Indian homes as well. Even the smallest house that I pass by in Bombay, like it's a 500 square foot house, they will still have plants. Indians like greenery because we've grown up with greenery. We've seen the kind of lush tropical forest that you can have. So it's a cultural bias. Indians like greenery. It's a good hobby. It's a good stress buster. And during COVID, during the lockdown, like Siddharth mentioned, when people were just at home, it was a good hobby to pick up.
The
Um,
one more hobby that I saw during the lockdown is people's interest in growing their own food. I think that picked up significantly, right?
yeah,
And generally, when you think about growing your own food, you think about, hey, you need a lot of space. Most people in urban centers can't do it, but there's so many new interesting techniques that optimize for space. Hydroponics is one of them, where people are now starting to grow their own food because they're concerned about what they're eating.
yeah. So exactly. So people are concerned about what they're eating. The whole organic food movement is increasing significantly, and so people are growing more food on their terraces. They're growing more food in their homes. in their own homes. They have vertical gardens. We'll discuss all this stuff later as well. Then this is something that we have spoken about before is Ayurveda. Ayurveda is seeing a big resurgence in India. People don't see Ayurveda as that old stodgy, like, हाँ मेरी दादी ने मुझे खिलाया kind of thing, right? Ayurveda is being seen in a new light. And because of that, people are growing more Ayurvedic plants like Tulsi, right? You'll see every Indian home, not every, but a lot of Indian homes will have Tulsi at home. And people are growing more and more of these Ayurvedic plants. And finally, our hot, humid, tropical environment is perfect for a lot of plants. A funny thing is that in the US last year, there was a huge demand for what are called succulent plants. These are basically desert plants. And because of that, a lot of Indians also bought it. A lot of Indian nurseries started stocking succulents, but people would get them home and they would all die because we are in a tropical country. Succulents cannot grow here.
That there's a business opportunity right there in terms of information, because a lot of people are getting into gardening, and it's easy to buy a plant, but it's so hard to sort of keep them alive and help them grow and stuff like that.
Okay, so
Information.
this is what I want to talk about. What's changing? Gardening is moving online, and this is part of it. Information, the amount of information you'll find about gardening in India nowadays is crazy. You just go online, you Google it, you'll find a bunch of content websites, you'll find a bunch of influencers, including my wife, on Instagram, on YouTube, on a bunch of different places. Because before this, all the gardening information was all Western.
Yeah.
But the kind of weather in the US, the kind of weather in the UK is different. It's not tropical. You're not going to have the plants are not going to grow the same way.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one thing that's happening. There are a lot more influencers in gardening than there were before. Number two, garden supplies and garden like plants, they're moving online. Their websites like Ugaao, which is doing what, like 10-15 crores in revenue, approximately, something like that.
Somewhere around that 20 crores, somewhere around 20 crores. My Bagicha is another one. I don't know how big they are, but Kareena Kapoor advertised for them on Instagram. So yeah, I don't know if it was, yeah, exactly.
There are a bunch of others. I know my wife follows a plant Instagram page, and that Instagram page sells their plants through the Instagram page. I also know that the logistics for selling plants has changed dramatically, because now they know how to pack it and they know how to ship it. Now, number three, you can grow plants in India and you can export them. So, for example, my wife found a random plant in Sikkim and she was like, oh my God, this plant is a super rare plant. And okay, this is another trend, by the way.
Sahil, it was random for you, not for somebody who knew.
Yeah, not random for her. Not random for her. But she saw the plant and she knew that in the US, this plant sells for $1,000 each. She just took a cutting, she brought it back to Bombay, and now we have two of them. And if she wanted, she could keep propagating them, because plants you can just keep propagating. She can just keep propagating them. She can make a whole bunch of them, and she can just keep exporting to the US for $1,000 each. And because we are in a tropical country, it's easy to do that. While in a place like the US, it's not that easy. And there's a big business of this happening in Thailand and Indonesia.
Yeah.
Huge business of growing tropical plants in Thailand and Indonesia. No reason it can't happen in India as well.
Correct.
Okay. So that was number three. Number three is rare plants. That's becoming a bigger trend in India. So my wife specifically likes to collect rare plants. She has a bunch of rare plants throughout the house, which she bought for like 200, 300, 500 rupees. And in the US, they go for 200, 300, $500. So rare plants, but now there are some rare plants that are selling for tens of thousands, lakhs of rupees in India as well. So that trend is coming into India as well. People like to collect stuff.
Yeah. So I mean, this is for someone who's into gardening, right? Like if you're passionate about it, this is something that you can pick up as a side hustle.
Yeah, exactly. Now, number 5 is vertical gardens and terrace gardens. This is something that I think that has come up more during COVID, where people in small spaces, because again, India in general is cramped.
Yeah.
Not Siddharth's house in Indore. I've seen it. But India in general is cramped. So in a 500 square foot house in Bombay, you can't have a bunch of plants, right? What people are building is just a vertical garden on their wall, and they put a bunch of plants in there. It's become very popular. And you can have a lot of plants in that vertical garden. I think Siddharth, you also have one, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
My
yes.
wife built this greenhouse of plants over here as well, vertically. So yeah, you can do
Yeah.
all this kind of stuff.
And that's also been combined with hydroponics, right? Soil-less farming, which is way more space efficient. You can grow vegetables and plants just in water. So there are a bunch of people who are trying to do home kits for hydroponics.
Yeah.
Pinfresh is one of them. I know the guy personally, an ISB alum, who's just trying to sell these hydroponic kits where you can grow stuff at home vertically, horizontally, however you want.
Yeah, and hydroponics is not the only kind of soilless gardening. There's another thing called Lecca. So Lecca is a kind of clay that absorbs water, and you put some chemicals in there as well, and then you can grow. We grow a bunch of plants in Lecca in our house as well.
Yeah.
So it's changing quite a bit, and terrace gardens and home home gardens, home farms. That's
Yeah.
becoming a thing where people grow the vegetables that they want. I went to an IoT exhibition where they had a fully automated IoT wall garden that you can just bring home, you can install, and you can get all your vegetables from there. So a lot of stuff is happening. There's a lot of innovation happening in this space.
The additional space I think we haven't spoken about, this is more B2B, but I know someone who's sort of started a landscaping business for, they're partnering with architects to do landscaping from a gardening perspective and stuff like that for large buildings. That itself could be huge margins, right? Like the margins are crazy there.
Yeah, so it's not just landscaping, right? You can also interior sign up with interior designers. So interior designer plus a gardener
Yeah,
to do up people's homes
yeah,
in a small apartment to make it more beautiful, more approachable, right?
yeah,
So landscaping for large businesses, but also interior designer plus gardener for small spaces,
yeah.
and that's happening in a big way as well. My wife has been approached several times, in fact, for doing people's homes. Okay, I get that. Reminds me another opportunity for which my wife has been approached is to do courses
Ooh,
for large
interesting.
businesses. She's done this on other cohort based websites as well, where she has taught courses about gardening.
Interesting.
Yeah, so teach courses about gardening. That's another big opportunity as well.
Yeah,
But gardening is, and here's the thing: my wife picked up everything she knows about gardening in less than 1 year. She decided one day she wants to become a gardener. She became a gardener, and she just read everything and I think actually not even a year, 6 months. She picked up everything, and now she's
yeah,
been seen online as a thought leader about gardening because she does
yeah.
know a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I mean,
her
I've
page,
I've I've met her, and she will just rattle off some scientific names of the plants, and
yeah,
I'm just confused on how does she know all of these wide
yeah.
range of plants.
So
Yeah,
follow her on the Bombay Gardener. It's really interesting stuff. You will see me there sometimes as well, where she makes fun of my lack of knowledge of gardening. Anyways, now we're going to close this chapter, close this meeting about gardening. Gardening is an exciting space. I think you guys should check it out. Please like, please subscribe, please comment, and please let us know